Helps if I add myself to the stream, doesn't it? Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Race.dev Hacktoberfest Help Desk. My name is Joe, and this is the first of 3 of our shows today. If you are new to the show, Hacktoberfest Help Desk is a show where we try and help you land your pull requests this Hacktoberfest through answering your questions about what you're working on and the projects you're trying to contribute to, as well as helping you find new projects and new ways to contribute to those projects. So we've got a bunch of special guests all throughout the month. We're here 3 times a day for the rest of October, the weekdays of October. So that's 8 more days left. And today we have a very special guest indeed, as I'm sure you've all seen if you are here. We have Matt Cowley, the Community Platform Manager at DigitalOcean, coming to join us. So we'll add him to the show and he'll introduce himself shortly. But before that, a couple of notes and administrivia for you all. So first up, as I said, we are here to help, which means you can ask questions in chat anytime. If you come to this chat to ask Matt when you're going to get your t-shirt, no, do that somewhere else. Leave the poor man alone. But we are here to help you with your Hacktoberfest questions, so you can ask those anytime, and we'll answer them as we go along and try and answer them all before the end of the show. If you want to post a link in chat or anything that you want to share a project you're working on, or you want to share something, you're very welcome to do that. Just at RaiseDevs, let me know beforehand in chat so that I can add you to the permit list. Otherwise, our bot will time you out for posting a link because the internet is a scary place full of spam. So we have a bot filtering for links. But I can permit you to post those links. You just need to give me a heads up. Okay, excellent, cool. So other than that, just a couple of notes and then we'll get going. First up, you can find us and our schedule at twitch.tv RaiseDev schedule. As I said, we are live 3 times a day for the rest of Hacktoberfest with some really amazing guests. That schedule is updated weekly, so it currently has the schedule for the rest of the week. Stick around at the end of the show and I'll give you a little teaser of what's to come today and for the rest of the week. If you want notifications when we go live, you can drop us a follow and that will get you all the notifications you need. And then the other thing is, who are Raise.dev? Why are we here? Why are we doing this? Why do we care about Hacktoberfest? We are a company that is trying to help you get where you want to be in your developer career, whether it's your first developer job that you're trying to get, or you're trying to get promotion, or move from mid-level to senior, or change careers, or help grow your team. Raise.dev is here to help. We have expert coaches who can help you get the experience that you need to make that career jump. And right now, we're completely free whilst you're in early access. So you can sign up. We're already getting the generic Hacktoberfest questions. Perfect. So I'm just going to add our guest. Sign up at raise.dev if you're interested in that. But for now, please welcome Mr. Matt Cowley to the stream.
Hello.
Hey, Matt, how you doing?
Oh, amazing. I'm so glad we're already getting questions.
It was the perfect one as well. Whoa, Luke with the big gifts.
Whoa.
Look at you, big spender. Oh, we got an emote. That's awesome. Anyway, thank you, Luke. So yeah, welcome to the stream.
Hi.
On the off chance that someone in chat doesn't know who you are, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, and for the sake of the VOD as well. Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Matt Cowley. I go by Matt IPv4 on most social media platforms, depending where you look. Sometimes I'm just IPv4. If you've never met me before, I am the Community Platform Manager at DigitalOcean. So I look after our community website. I work on things like Hacktoberfest and a lot of our open source projects. Outside of DigitalOcean, though, I'm also a maintainer of CDN.js at Cloudflare, which is the world's second largest CDN and the world's largest open source CDN. And beyond that, I'm also a uni student, just to make life more interesting.
Nice.
So I think that kind of sums up everything about me.
Yeah, absolutely. And to give folks an idea of what we're gonna get into, we're gonna talk about those things Matt mentioned. We're gonna talk about his career and how he's been involved in so many enormous things. And then we're gonna move on to talking about those projects: Hacktoberfest, CDN.js, Hey Matt, don't forget your uni assignments. Yeah,
It's fine. I did some this morning. I did some last night.
I also want to talk about, just like managing that, like you're at uni, it's the biggest time of the year for DigitalOcean's community thing. CDN.js is a huge project. So, exactly. So chat is probably going to be very active. So I imagine we're going to be taking tangents a lot. So yeah, I guess let's kick off. So first of all, I want to hang on like your role at DigitalOcean a little bit. So because community platform manager, one of the things we try and do on this show is show people like the different ways that you can use technological skills, and that like the only career path to you isn't just software engineering. And we've heard from a lot of DevRel people, we've heard from a lot of program managers. And so community platform manager is a really interesting title to me because like you are doing the community management part, the people part, but then you are also actively pushing code to that project every day. Can you tell us a little bit about like what that job means and what it is you actually do?
Yeah, so I mean, actually, I can kind of I guess we can do a bit of journey story here as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this role has evolved. I wasn't originally a community platform manager. So about a year and a half ago now, I'm trying to think how long I've been at DO for. The then director of community growth reached out to me and asked if I wanted to join DO as a community manager.
Awesome.
So I did. And so for the first probably, 6 months of my time at DO, I was just a community manager. So my day-to-day was literally just sitting on our Q&A site, answering questions from the community and moderating that.
Cool.
So that was very much just pure community management, no code, nothing else. I mean, yes, there was, technical skills in answering the questions, but that was that.
Yeah.
And then someone points...
So I was going to say, how did that come about? Like, do you know where they found you and like asked if you wanted to do that role?
So they reached out to me via LinkedIn,
Nice.
which I hate saying because I'm generally one for ignoring like everything on LinkedIn because it's
good stuff through there occasionally. Yeah,
but yeah, I'll say it was one of those very rare, actually interesting opportunities. So yeah, that's how that happened.
Nice, awesome.
I don't actually know really how they found me. I guess it's probably just the fact that I had just come out of school, and so I was just connecting with anyone and everyone I could find in the industry.
Yeah. Nice, awesome, cool. So so you started off in a pure community role, answering questions,
and then 6 months in, probably about then, someone kind of pointed out, you could actually write some code for this site if you want. And so, I started looking at it, and it's a Ruby on Rails application. I've mentioned this before on Twitter quite a few times. I, up until that point, had never touched Ruby or Ruby on Rails in my life.
Which is, it's like, I want to dwell on a little bit because as Luke said, I feel silly, but I thought Matt was based in the US. He sounds more like he lives down the road from me. You are in the UK, I'm assuming, and like Ruby is, there are certain elements of the tech community where Ruby is very big, but like it's not addressed at all in any of our computing curriculums. Like you do not touch Ruby or learn Ruby on Rails at all.
At school, I had touched Python and some JavaScript, and that was it.
Right.
Yeah. So Ruby was completely fresh to me. But yeah, so I guess one of the cool things about being a developer though is that once you've learned a language, it's actually reasonably okay and simple to. I hate to say simple; it's not a nice word to use, but it's. I can't think of a better word. It's reasonably simple to change to a different language, and you'll pick it up quite quickly because
once you've got the fundamentals, the thing that changes really is the syntax, and especially if you learn Python, Ruby is like they're often compared in terms of approach, right?
Yeah, Ruby is the more advanced Python, I think, is the way to put it.
Yeah, interesting. So this is again like a complete tangent, and I warned you this would happen. We've had a lot of like Rails and Ruby on the show. Lots of the Ruby community have been through here, and people in chat have been asking like, why Ruby and that kind of thing. What I want to ask you that is kind of tangential to that. How did you go about picking up Rails as a framework when you first encountered this project?
To be quite frank and quite honest, I just opened the source code and started doing stuff.
Perfect.
That's how I like to learn new languages and new projects, is just find an issue that I have investment in, a feature that I, irrespective of the code, I have the understanding of the logic that needs to be implemented, and then I will just sit in there and figure it out until it works. So awesome. I've no idea what the first feature was that I added to the site, but
I'm sure we could go looking for the GitHub repo later and find
it's a private repo, so
no,
I don't really want to hop on the VPN and risk leaking things.
That is a good point. Sorry, everyone. I have this need to fiddle with stuff while I'm talking, and I've just dropped the thing I was fiddling with, which is now going to really annoy me for the rest of the stream. No, it's all good. Cool. So you started contributing to the code, and that, as you said, was like the community platform at that point, right? Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. So I don't know. I probably then spent a year slowly becoming more and more active in the development of the community site itself.
Yeah.
And if you go and look at my community profile on DigitalOcean, you will see that my activity there has dwindled quite drastically.
Interesting.
And then October came around last year, and suddenly I was like, so last year, actually, the Hacktoberfest site itself was contracted out to Raise.
Yeah, which we've spoken about with a couple of alumni.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were building that site mainly last year. And my main role in Hacktoberfest last year was the kind of the social and support aspects.
Right.
But I was also still working on that, helping out with development where I could. So that kind of reinforced that whole, my role at DO is more than community management, it's development as well.
Yeah.
And then
I guess just to briefly go back on that a bit. So for folks, we need a face reveal. No, go away.
Nope.
So for folks who have no idea what we're talking about, as I explained very sort of at the beginning, we're like a coaching service to help you get experience in your career. Now we're like fully online and remote. Prior to this, there was a pilot with a group of folks who came through the program, and they worked on different projects, different companies, and then work basically moved into those companies full time after. So Raise.dev was hired to work on the Hacktoberfest site, and I believe it's Chelsea that now works at DO full time.
Yes, yeah, possibly, and Raise also actually worked on the community platform as well.
Yeah. Oh, nice, awesome, cool.
So they have touched everything that I'm also touching, which is quite awesome.
Our fates were intertwined. Oh god, I've just seen the amount of emoji reactions to our announcement in the Hacktoberfest Discord.
Yeah, the Discord's kind of gone a bit wild with the emoji.
So cool. So then you started working on the Hacktoberfest app, and I guess that first year you were doing mainly social media and community support. So I guess one thing I want to
if you look at the app, you can see that I was committing some stuff last year, just helping out and fixing things.
Nice, awesome. And yeah, I guess on that social media and community aspect support, I want to get into that because it's such a wild campaign. Like I've known Daniel for a while and used to be involved in Hacktoberfest from the GitHub side, but obviously like as a partner, you never see, I don't know, the full extent of the madness, I guess. Like what I think for like some people, and this is like very true of and we're not going to go too much into the first week of Hacktoberfest this year, but like one of the things that like I saw a lot on Twitter, which like wound me up a little bit, was people not really understanding how things change when you're operating at this scale, right?
Yeah.
Like this many users. So like you talk to us a little bit about like managing a community of like hundreds, thousands of people coming all at once.
Yeah. So I mean, last year was actually, I guess, far more sheltered than this year. We didn't have a Discord last year, so it was just the Twitter account, which was a support channel last year, and then also our support email address. The Twitter account, I say it was reasonably simple to deal with, probably just because I limited myself in what I did there.
Yeah.
So weird. I'd go through every day. I had TweetDeck columns set up. I'd go through and any tweet relating to Hacktoberfest, give it a like just to help amplify it through Twitter algorithm. And then we used it as a support channel last year. So people would quite often tweet at us with questions, and we had a whole host of support macros that we responded to. And our DMs were open as well. So that was kind of an impromptu support channel, which
I imagine was an absolute flood.
Yeah, took up far more of my time than I wanted to do this year, really. But I don't know. The community that actually interacted with that handle was quite nice last year.
Right.
There's always some people that complain about Hacktoberfest, whether it be the spam that we had at the start of this year or just Hacktoberfest generally. Some people just don't like the whole concept of it.
Yeah.
The community that engaged in that handle generally is quite pleasant because it's the ones that actively want to engage with the program.
Right. You don't tend to get subtweets directly out of the handle. I guess it's not really a subtweet at that point.
That's not really a subtweet, then, Joe. But there's some tweets, but you look past them. And then there's obviously our support email address, which is I don't know, arguably the bigger component. I can't remember the numbers last year. It was probably close to 10,000 tickets over the month, I think. Which last year was pretty much just me answering them. So it was entertaining. Again, we obviously just everything has macros.
Right.
Canned
replies.
Yeah, canned replies, and there's actually very, very little that ended up requiring a human written response.
Which it makes sense, like for anyone who's been hanging around in the Hacktoberfest Discord, and I know that Luke and Nicholas especially have been very helpful in this. That like we're not that original in our problems, and like a lot of the questions are the same. And so when there's a lot of these things with community support that I imagine just come down to like, hey, recognizing the patterns and providing the right answer.
Yeah, I mean, like I think this year we're really trying to categorize our support tickets,
Right.
to kind of work on at the end of the year. We want to do some analysis and work on the self-serve aspect of Hacktoberfest.
Yeah.
I think there's like 10 categories of ticket we've narrowed it down to, and like almost everything fits into those 10 categories of ticket. So
I'm trying to imagine what those 10 would be. Obviously, there's the when will my PRs mature? Will I get my t-shirt category?
Yeah, there's I guess the main ones are there t-shirts, which we have the world's longest macro for in the Discord,
right,
with a shorter one that we use in support.
And
then there's a group of questions around what qualifies as a pull request, which obviously got far more complicated this year than ever before. And then there's just questions around like there's also a whole category of questions that we ship off directly to Cotis, our swag provider. So people can ask us,
so much.
What country can you ship to, or can I change the shirt size? We just fire those straight off to Cotis instead. So support's quite. It's a challenge purely because of the volume. Obviously, Hacktoberfest has actually quite a small team behind it. Which our whole aim is to make it as self-serve as possible. So that's why we have a massive FAQ on the site. And we'll definitely be looking to add more stuff to that next year based on this year's tickets, which we did last year as well. So I don't know.
Very cool.
I quite enjoy it. The community's quite nice, and obviously this year we've had the Discord as well, which has been, touch wood, quite the success.
Yeah, it's been really nice, and it's been a really nice supportive environment. I think that's one of the reasons why, like, and I understand where maintainers who are already pushed for time are coming from with their concerns, but ultimately, like, it's a really welcoming and kind time for people to get into open source, which I think is one of the really special elements about it. And on that note, Ben asked, how far in advance do you start preparing Hacktoberfest, like the comms and community strategy in terms of like getting ready to answer the flood, I guess?
Oh, I'm gonna hate saying this, and someone might get angry at work, but who knows? Hacktoberfest is one of those programs that gets planned days before it happens.
Right.
Not literal days. But I mean, we were work this year. Actually, we started work on the app itself like 3 months in advance. Just because we wanted to actually understand. Obviously, Rays wrote the app last year, and so obviously it's a new team for us this year. So we wanted to actually work through it, make sure we knew what was happening.
Right.
And the core team behind Hacktoberfest, so the 3 program managers in charge, have been working on it like all year pretty much. But the majority of the grind that comes in preparing happens in like the last month before it.
I know there's a lot of things that, like, aside from the app, the other thing that happens really far in advance that I think a lot of people don't think about. I mean, you kind of touched on it when you mentioned Cotis, but like, it is an enormous logistical challenge getting t-shirts, and not just t-shirts, all the other swag to everywhere in the world. So like, I know one of the things that happens really far in advance is like, hey, all those cool partner swag, like the Vonage socks and the stickers and whatever else comes with the t-shirt, like all the partners have to send that.
Do not come with the t-shirt.
They do not come with it. Sorry, that was a misleading comment. They're a separate thing.
But you should go and earn your Vonage socks because they're quite cool.
Yes. But there is some stuff that comes with the t-shirt. There is something from Rays that comes with the t-shirt. And like, you have to get that all in one place in order to be able to send it out, right?
I say, luckily I don't have to deal with that. That's not something that's under my purview. But
that's poor Daniel and Holly.
All the partner coordination that happens is quite the monumental effort, and obviously it's actually quite an expensive program to run. Luckily, again, I don't have to see the numbers involved, but if you think about it, we're sending out like 70,000 t-shirts and then probably more sticker packs as well. Across the globe, it's expensive.
Yeah, for sure. And then like normally there would be the meetup costs as well, which obviously aren't happening this year. But you also in previous years, if you were organizing Hacktoberfest meetup, you'd get a box of swag for the meetup instead. And that was another huge thing. So I guess like what I was kind of getting at is like, I think a lot of the reason why a lot of like the big hurried prep happens like closer to the event is there are certain things that have to be in place before other things can happen, right? There are just dependencies. And like when it comes to big community stuff, like there are just things that come right up to the line with every program.
I mean, I guess it's also for myself and the development design team behind Hacktoberfest. We're not dedicated to Hacktoberfest.
Right.
Hacktoberfest is like a really tiny thing in our globe, in our grand picture for the year. So yeah, I was like, I didn't jump on Hacktoberfest until I
Right.
absolutely had to because I have loads of other stuff to do.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
just not
for
happening last month.
example, a lot of the folks who are working on the partner and content side of Hacktoberfest are also currently preparing for this wild 24-hour conference that DigitalOcean has going on, which is just like.
And obviously, we also launched our new
the app platform.
Yeah, we launched app platform like a week ago. So that was obviously the design team have been working on Hacktoberfest, deploy that conference, and the launch of app platform all at the same time.
It's a lot to juggle. So I guess I kind of go back to you and your work. So we spoke a little bit about how like DigitalOcean came along and how that happened, but you're also managing or like working on CDNJS and maintaining for CDNJS, which is either one of those on their own is a lot of work. How did that happen, and how do you balance the two? I am going to have to find this thing I dropped. It's driving me insane.
Go for it. I will ramble for a minute. So CDNJS, I actually, so unlike Dio, I started out as CDNJS because it's an open source project. I started out as a contributor, like anyone else out in the open source world. I was just working on it in my spare time for the fun of it, essentially. I genuinely cannot remember how I came across it or what came over me to decide to contribute to it.
Yeah.
But I did. And so I think I was contributing to the repository, kind of just helping adding some libraries. I ended up reaching out to one of the founders via email and kind of said, there isn't a community around CDNJS. Like, you guys aren't active on social media. You're not active anywhere else. It's literally just a repository and a CDN service. Right. You power like 10% of the internet. You should have a following.
Right.
Can I help with that? And this founder got back to me and said, yep, you can help. And so I was then onboarded as a member of CDNJS, as part of the GitHub organization.
Right.
Still unpaid at that point.
Right.
You know, like all good
typical maintainer.
Yeah, like all good open source projects and typical maintainers, there's no funding in place at all. Right. Which I guess we can get to that in a second, because that's kind of a whole story itself.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so that was back in mid 2018, I think. I kind of informally worked on CDNJS as a community manager, but also still maintaining it. And so that kind of continued just on the side as open source contributions do, until late 2019. My memory is awful. I apologize. Yeah. I'm probably going to get this timeline rather wrong, but so and then late 2019, things somewhat fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of realized that, there was essentially two of us active maintaining this thing, myself and Peter.
Yeah.
So there's two blokes in their spare time, unpaid, maintaining the CDN that powers 10% of the internet.
JavaScript. Yeah.
Yeah. And Peter had somewhat had enough of being unpaid, with very little access. So our founders had really heavily restricted the access we had in that GitHub organization, which made doing things incredibly difficult.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine.
Yeah. So Peter kind of parted ways, shall we say, with CDNJS. And I was sat there going on my own, and I just, what do I do now? On my own, I can't really do much. So obviously, we had branch protection in place and stuff, so I couldn't even merge pull requests because it needed a second review.
That's just a completely untenable situation.
Yeah. And so I reached out to Cloudflare. I just said, hi, you guys sponsor us. Can you take over and help out?
Yeah.
And after a lot of back and forth between Cloudflare and our founders, Cloudflare kind of informally took over running the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And as part of that, I joined Cloudflare as a contractor to continue maintaining it.
Super cool. Wow. That's a really interesting journey, both for you and the open source project. But oh God, where to start with that? So I think let's start with this. I think you had something that you want to talk on this anyway. So as we kind of touched on, being an open source maintainer is often a thankless and unpaid task. and you are fortunate enough in this case to be paid to be able to work on this project. How does that change how you interact with and work on the project? I imagine that really changes the expectations, both for you personally and also in terms of like how it feels to get up in the morning and look at an issue.
Yeah. So I guess to me, the main thing that changed is that instead of just working on it whenever I want, I now think about when I'm going to work on it because I bill that time.
Yeah.
So instead of just jumping on a random issue when it turns up, I'll leave it, and then like twice a week, I'll work through everything in a block.
Right.
So luckily, it's not the most active open source project in the world. So I can kind of jump on it twice a week, and that works. But yeah, that was the main change, I think, was just, my time was now suddenly being paid for. So I had to be careful with what time I was putting in. I guess there's also the mentality change, though, of suddenly not only am I an open source maintainer, but I'm paid. And so there's some level of expectation from, I guess, Cowley, not really, but from the community that we are responsive.
So actually, that might be a good, just a brief detour. Sorry, this is a detour and a detour. Like, what are Cloudflare expecting? I mean, I guess for their benefit, they rely on CDN.js for their product in some way, and so they want the project to be healthy, and that's their main expectation here, right?
Yeah, I guess to them, it's almost just brand reputation. That was the way I pitched it when I asked them to take over, was at the end of the day, it's your domain. And if it dies, it's going to look bad for Cloudflare rather than for two open source maintainers.
Yeah.
Because it's obviously it's a free to use service, and it's not a Cloudflare core product. It's very much, even with them now paying the maintainers on it, it's still an external project,
right?
That just happens to be sponsored and backed by Cloudflare. So yeah, I don't. There's very little expectation on their end. So there's myself working on it as an external maintainer.
Yeah.
And then there's, I don't know the teams well enough internally. I think it's the performance and speed team are kind of, they own,
it's a cool name.
They own CDN.js, and they just help out when I need stuff. So like, if I need to do a deployment to the CDN, they'll work on that. We migrated the entire CDN recently to KV workers. There's a blog post on Cloudflare's site about this, because we had an intern for the summer, which was wild.
Right.
That's to go from two open source maintainers to having a paid maintainer and a paid
intern. Yeah.
So we had an intern over the summer who helped us migrate the entire infrastructure to KV workers. So he's written a brilliant blog post on the Cloudflare site about this. So obviously they help out that because I don't have access to that, being an external maintainer. But yeah, I don't think there's much expectation. In my mind, there's that expectation that I'm essentially on call 24/7. I'm not paid to be on call 24/7.
Right.
But in my mind, I have notifications set up, so if people start pinging us in the night, my phone will wake me up.
Right.
And I'm the one that runs our status page.
Right.
Because, if we break, it's major.
Yeah. This is
there is no minor accident with CDN.js.
Yeah. This is like, are you familiar with Nadia Egball's Roads and Bridges report?
I don't think I am, actually.
Okay, cool. So this is really hit me that. So Nadia Egball is a really interesting person. So she used to work at GitHub, but the reason she went to GitHub was basically like she wanted to do research into like essentially the open source economy. And so she describes this thing of like basically making her own PhD. Like she found different places to do parts of this research and ways to like fund that. And one of the things she did was a report with the Ford Foundation called Roads and Bridges, the unseen labor behind our digital infrastructure. And parts of this report really heavily focus on projects like the curl project. So like curl is like a core piece of, like
everything.
The Linux like HTTP toolkit. And like it turns out it's like maintained by like one dude up a mountain in Switzerland somewhere, right? And so what you're describing is giving me these vibes really bad. Yeah. Like we have these really important roads and bridges that like literally hold up our modern internet, and they're like kept standing by like one dude, and it's terrifying.
Yeah,
but
it's quite
great that
you're
you're paid for it now. It's
the number of enterprise projects that relied on CDN.js without realizing that it's two blokes in their spare time maintaining it.
Yeah.
It's like, even Microsoft,
Crazy.
quite a lot of Microsoft sites use us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just,
Absolutely wild.
I say, the fact that I'm now paid in some ways makes me feel a bit calmer.
Right.
And the fact that Cloudflare is involved, because if
Yeah.
something does go drastically wrong, I can
Right.
now just deflect to Cloudflare. Whereas
for
before,
sure. And also equally, like if you end up like having something else to do in your life, like they have the capability to pay someone else to take over. It's not now just driven by people who have like the passion and the time. Now it's like, hey, there is financial incentive for someone to maintain this, which is
and they have access as well now. That was
right.
that was the other big thing. Was like when Peter left and I was on my own for a while, I was stuck. I didn't have the access to add anyone else.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the scary. That was more scary than anything else. And that was what caused Peter to leave. Really, was just the lack of access we had.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like it's already a thankless task, and then like when you have to ask permission to do the job all the time, that's going to be even more draining. Like there's like our industry talks a lot about burnout in terms of like that kind of area of exhaustion where it's hard to work and hard to function. And like there's a lot of talk of like, oh, that's due to overwork, but there's also a lot of talk of like that's due to lack of agency, like lack of control of your situation, and like not having access to the project you're meant to be a maintainer of is going to be a big contributing factor towards that.
Yeah, it was a wild time. So yeah, I say it's quite comforting to know that now there is Cloudflare themselves with full access to everything. So even if like myself and the other Cloudflare people that actually work on it, if we all just died overnight, Cloudflare still have access and they can keep it going. So
cool. So yeah, I guess the other thing I wanted to kind of jump on with this is like, as you said, you're studying at uni, you're doing these two full jobs, and like actually becoming a software contractor in itself is like has a lot of overhead in terms of running a business. I imagine your registers are limited somewhere or something like that.
I'm not. So I'm fully self-employed.
Nice.
So
awesome.
I am myself.
Yeah.
As far as tax man is concerned.
Cool. So yeah, this is a lot of work. Like, how do you, for all of us who are wishing we were more productive, how do you manage that?
I don't know. As I said at the start, what is time management? I guess we can walk through my regular day to get an idea of how things work. So at the start of the day, I wake up at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. depending on what university lectures I have. I'll either have a 9 a.m. or a 10 a.m. lecture every day of the week. So that'll be when I get up. I will jump out of bed, run downstairs, grab myself some breakfast and a tea, and hop on a Teams call for normally 2 hours for a uni lecture. If I'm bored in that lecture, I do then, start to work through GitHub.
Right.
So the other project that I help maintain, which I haven't even mentioned so far, is js.org. If you've never met js.org before, we're a domain registrar that's completely open source.
Right.
So by creating a pull request, anyone can request a subdomain for js.org.
And it's intended for like JavaScript projects, right? It's like
it was originally very much just JavaScript projects, and it's kind of now evolved into basically anything with reasonable content.
Interesting.
It's all human reviewed. So myself and Stefan, who owns it, we review every single pull request by hand to validate the content, make sure it's above board and something we'd accept. So generally I'll jump on that and work through the pull requests there in the morning while sitting on a uni lecture, just to get it out of the way. That's completely unpaid. That's my one bit of open source that I can still confidently say is true open source unpaid.
Right.
Which I don't know is somewhat satisfying in the fact that it's still unpaid. Makes me feel like I'm still doing true open source maintenance.
Wow, the self-flagellation in that. Excellent.
So I'll do that. And then once the uni lecture ends, I'll generally go and start doing some DO work.
Right.
I generally try and do it like an hour in the morning before the US wakes up. So when it's nice and quiet, no one else is up at work. I work through like our under review queue, which is the queue of posts on community that the site doesn't quite believe are real.
Right.
Things that have got dodgy links and such. So I work through those, review those. And during Hacktoberfest season, I'll also start to work through our support ticket queue in that hour in the morning. So I get as much done then as I can. That takes us about 1 o'clock, at which point, I'll go and actually get dressed.
Right.
So actually, the fact that I'm sitting here in clothes as opposed to a onesie.
I mean,
quite a
why
blessing.
even bother? It's COVID season.
Yeah, so I'll get dressed, have lunch, and about 2 p.m. workday starts proper. So the US is online at that point. It's 9 a.m. US time, Eastern, at 2 here. So at that point, yeah, workday starts. I'm working on whatever. Currently, it's mostly like Hacktoberfest support, Hacktoberfest social, and also obviously maintaining the app itself and continuing to fix bugs.
Right.
But also a lot of meetings. Oddly, I'm one for actually being in meetings.
Right.
I know a lot of people, especially with COVID, have kind of tried to avoid meetings as much as they can.
The Zoom fatigue.
Yeah, but I actually prefer being in meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I quite often I have on my Google Calendar, I have my manager's calendar added, and I will just see what meetings he's got, and I will quite often DM him and just say, "Can I sit in this meeting?"
Yeah.
Just because I like to have awareness of what's happening in the company beyond
for sure.
my tiny little bubble.
Yeah, and I think working remote, especially with like a primarily US-based company, depending on how that company works, it can be really hard to do that. Like at GitHub, that used to be really easy without going to meetings because people at GitHub do everything in GitHub issues, so it's really easy to see everything that's happening. But if you're at a company where like they use Slack, for example, as their main communication platform, which is like literally impossible to keep track of.
Oh, we have thousands and thousands of Slack channels.
Yeah. So like being in meetings that are of areas of your concern. And also, there's a problem with meetings where like adding more people or more voices to it makes the meeting untenable. But that's not true if you're just sitting in the background for information.
Yeah, if you're just flying on the wall, yeah. So I do that quite a bit, and so a lot of my day is actually meetings. Though today, Wednesday is generally my free day, so this is this stream.
Sorry for ruining that for you.
This is the only thing in my calendar today.
Nice.
Is this? And the rest of my day is then free to do whatever I want. So yeah, I'll be working on either. So I don't know. Pre-Hacktoberfest, my day would have been working on community issues mostly. So once I've got all the moderation on the site out the way, I would then jump into the community repository itself and start working through feature requests from our teams.
Right.
Obviously, that's a private repository on an internal GitHub Enterprise instance.
Yeah.
So all the feature requests there are from people within the company. So luckily, there's very little triage involved. It's generally just cool. Yeah, working on that now. It's very rare we turn down requests.
Right.
So yeah, that would be my normal day. And then obviously with Hacktoberfest, a lot of the day now is spent working through support and obviously maintaining the app itself. And this doesn't really stop. So I will work from 2 till 6 normally. I'll grab dinner at 6 and then I'll jump back into work at 7. I tried to stop by 10.
Yeah.
But if anyone
it's a long work day.
If anyone was in the Discord last night, I was working till midnight last night because we found a bug in the Hacktoberfest app, which I still haven't fixed. But the pull request is up now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Nice. And we'll get into that in a minute. We're going to jump into some screen share in a moment. But before that, I want to circle back around to a couple of questions that were asked that I promised we'd answer and I completely ignored. So first up was from Ben, who it's always hard trying to work out whose Twitch usernames, who they are in the real world. But I believe this is Ben from Vonage. I may be wrong. But I've now lost the question. Oh, no. But basically, the gist of the question was Ben was saying, like, as someone who is new to being a supporting figure in Hacktoberfest this year, it was a big panic for him in preparing and getting materials ready and like knowing which channels to be active on and knowing what materials to have at hand to be the most helpful. Do you have any tips for that in terms of like making sure that you as an individual can be the biggest asset to like the newcomers who are flooding in at this time?
Without sounding weird, memorize the FAQs.
I mean, it's a good one.
Yeah. Or just at least know what's in the FAQs so you don't waste time answering questions when there's already a macro response essentially written for you.
Right.
And I guess the other one is just by being active in Hacktoberfest, both as a contributor and a maintainer and also as a partner, just the more you're active, the more you'll learn how Hacktoberfest works.
Right.
This is actually something we had internally this year, obviously, with a new development team working on the app. I was the only one that had worked on it last year. And so just having that insight into how everything works it's just so valuable.
Yeah.
Which is obviously really hard to just go and find. So it's not the greatest advice in the world.
Yeah. No, but it makes sense, and it rings true to like, yeah, I guess like to Ben, like the heart of Ben's question was like, hey, this is like my first rodeo, first time doing this. It gets a lot less stressful when it is kind of rote and you don't have to prepare, right? Which is also a trap in some ways. Like, as you've seen on some of the streams, there's times when I say like something that in past years of Hacktoberfest was true, and then I'm like, Matt, is that still true? Help me. Because so much has changed this year that my internal FAQ is now definitely out of date.
Oh, don't worry. Even I can do that on support tickets. I'm like, someone goes, oh, my pull request isn't showing up in the right state on the app. Yeah. And I have to sit there. I have to really sit there and think about like, is this pull request valid? I'm not really sure.
Oh God.
So a lot of my ticket answering now just involves opening up a local dev instance of the app and just
and actually just going and checking
and seeing what happens.
Nice. So yeah, that's obviously a power that like the third-party people who are doing their best to help during Hacktoberfest, like Luke, like Ben, like the volunteer crew, who have been incredible in the Discord, don't have. So we appreciate the work you're doing and hang in there. Yeah. So the other question we had, which is also go on.
It's also important to say, don't feel pressure and expectation, especially as a partner. Like, sure, yes, you're a partner, which I don't want to downplay at all, but we're quite happy to take the brunt of support. You know, at the end of the day, it's our program, and that's what we're here to do. So,
cool. Yeah,
it's never a question that anyone has.
An extension on this question again from Ben, which I misunderstood the question. It was he was wondering more if you have a strategy for how you juggle those channels. So how you're able to keep an eye on like Twitter, Discord, your email, and Twitch.
Part of that is the fact that I have 4 screens in front of me.
That helps. Yeah.
So on the left hand, I should talk through this. On the left hand side, I have a vertical monitor, which on a normal day would be Slack. So no matter what I'm doing, that is the only thing that ever graces that monitor is Slack. Yeah. So I always have company workspace up. I've then got 2 horizontal 1080p monitors in front of me. The left hand side is normally Discord. Though it might be, I generally put meetings there as well, and I've got StreamYard there currently. Yeah. But generally that's Discord, so I always have one eye on Discord at all times as well. Which so that's how I juggle Discord. I'm a strong user of Discord. So
your setup sounds very similar to mine. I'm actually wondering if I can do some jank and show this. Let me quickly
share.
All right, let's do a quick me without a green screen. Oh God, it's the wrong camera. There's me from the side. This one.
You've left. Oh, this has gone wrong. Hi chat, how are you? I think Joe Med crashed himself. We'll see in a second.
We're back. I don't know what happened there. It didn't like that.
Oh, you're back. Hello, welcome back.
How can I do this? Maybe if I just turn off. If I stop that, sorry, chat. My camera's going to go. 1 sec. If I do this now, no, that broke it again. Okay,
you're still here.
Yeah, I can't show this, but I have a very.
There we go.
I have a very similar setup where I have like I have a laptop, I have a screen constantly with Discord on, and like you can see that Luke is also running a setup like this because Luke is replying in here constantly, and I've just seen he's also replying in the Discord constantly as we're still going. So yeah, like it's obviously like it feels really trite to say just like, hey, get more monitors, but I think the real advice there, like the secret to why that works, is it's less context switching, right? Like you don't have to think, oh, I had this open, now I'm closing it to open this. It's just always there, and you can selectively ignore it as and when you need to.
Absolutely.
And I have a friend actually who lives in Amsterdam as well, who really takes us to the extreme, and he has like a wall-mounted monitor like behind, like away from his desk, further down in his office, which is just like a dashboard of stuff he cares about, and it's just always there in case like he ever wants to go check that stuff, and it's like a really interesting strategy.
I mean, I guess I do something similar there. I quite often will have Grafana open in a tab, and I will just, if I'm ever worried, jump into that tab and see what's happening.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. So, sorry. One last question from Ben. This is the Ben question hour.
That's fine.
Is there a directory of all the .js.org sites? I'm guessing the pull requests in the repo act is that directory,
Yes.
right?
So, hang on, let me share my screen, and we can
absolutely.
start on the
flawless transition into screen share land.
So, the js.org repository. The way it works is you submit a pull request to add. So, I guess one important thing, js.org, the only thing we really support nowadays is a CNAME record.
Right.
Because obviously, the majority of our users are using this with GitHub pages.
Mm-hmm.
So CNAMEs work, and
right.
we do have the ability to give like full name server control if you wanted it. But we generally reject those because at that point we have very little insight into what someone's doing with the subdomain. So it's quite risky for us. But yeah, so a pull request to here, all you're doing is adding a line to this file. It's just a JavaScript file. CNAME's active,
right?
And it has the key is the js.org subdomain, and the value is the CNAME roughly. We actually do things slightly differently here, in that if it's a GitHub pages site, we'll also track the repository, even though that isn't in the CNAME value.
Right.
It just allows us to more quickly validate things because once a year we do a full cleanup automatically.
And by cleanup, you mean like removing sites, or
removing any subdomain that's no longer active. So
cool.
I have on my personal account somewhere a repository with all the logic behind. It's great. Basically, it just loads this list in and sends off millions and millions of web requests to validate everything. And then obviously we create automatic issues and stuff. So having that repository is useful. But yeah, so a pull request to here just adds a line to this file, and then Stefan will manually go and add that into Cloudflare in our DNS zone. So it's all very, very manual. And people have actually suggested in the past we automate it, and we generally say no. Interestingly,
I mean, that seems like a good policy when like you're talking about, you hosting sites that you don't know the contents of. It seems like a manual review.
I don't want to automate this because then suddenly we're not having that human review of is this site legit. So yeah, if you ever wanted to see all the js.org sites, this file is where you go, because everything is in here. The nearly 3,000 sites.
That's very cool. Neat. Awesome. Should we jump from here into Hacktoberfest? Do you want to walk us through how the Hacktoberfest app works?
Sure.
I love that it's open source. It's sorry? After an infinite scroll.
Yep. There we go. Let's go back to the homepage. So the Hacktoberfest repository, for anyone that hasn't seen it, is at DigitalOcean/Hacktoberfest.
Get that in chat.
It is a rather ugly Ruby on Rails app.
Define. Oh, that's the wrong one. Define ugly in the context of a Ruby on Rails app.
A lot of what we've done is very hacky to make it work.
Right.
I guess this in part comes from the fact that I'm working on it, and I have zero actual training in working on Ruby and Ruby on Rails apps. My entire knowledge of Ruby and Ruby on Rails is from submitting pull requests to the community site and to here. So yeah, a lot of what's done here feels very jank. For example, one thing that keeps coming up internally, we track pull requests in the database. They have zero relation to a user in the database.
Okay, interesting.
Which is like we forgot to do that at some point.
Right. So when you want to relate those to a user,
we talked to GitHub.
You're looking in the I was going to say. So you're looking in like your users table for their GitHub handle, going back to the pull request, looking up their GitHub handle, and then linking them to there.
No. So if you wanted to get a user's pull requests, you load the user model for them, and then make a GraphQL GitHub API query to get.
At least you're using GraphQL.
Yes, that is actually for reasons we can probably talk about in a minute with the spam and stuff. Absolute blessing that this uses GraphQL. So you'd have to make a GraphQL query to GitHub to get all their pull requests. And then using the ID of each pull request, you could get the row from the pull request table.
Cool.
But I mean,
Okay.
the only thing we actually track in the date. So last year, Hacktoberfest didn't store pull requests at all.
Interesting.
There just was 0 state for a pull request.
Right. So it's doing that lookup every time.
Yeah.
A user.
Because everything was determined based off that current state of the pull request on GitHub.
Mhm.
And this year I went, you know what? We should actually track the state of a pull request locally.
So that's where the maturation period comes in.
So we did have that last year,
Right.
but it was based purely on when a pull request got created. Because there's nothing else really that ever changed that. Whereas obviously this year, a lot of things changed with what qualifies as a pull request.
Right.
So yeah, luckily we're now tracking those in a database. So the database table for that has like the pull request ID and a timestamp and a state, and that's it.
Cool.
So I mean, like we store the bare minimum data we need. Everything else just gets pulled from GitHub when we need it.
Okay.
Which results in a lot of errors from GitHub. You look at our Airbrake. The GitHub API is surprisingly unstable.
Interesting. As in, like, it changes a lot, or you're getting
it just
errors
randomly
from
throws 500s at you.
Right.
Just
yeah.
Sometimes you'll make a request and it will just go, nah, don't like that request today.
I mean, this is something that's worth mentioning that used to be true, and I'm sure it's still true, is that the part of the reason why the GitHub API is so feature complete is because like their approach is basically API first. So any feature, like basically the API that is exposed to users is the exact same API that's used internally to build features. So it's getting a lot of volume.
Yes. Yeah, so we did. I think we actually had a ticket open with support last year to kind of just discuss the fact that it was 500ing sometimes.
Right.
And they went, I can't remember the exact response, but it was basically just along the lines of, yeah, that's expected.
Right.
Deal with it.
Repeated requests until it works.
Yeah. So we do.
Interesting. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I mean, I can just kind of. I'm not.
Yeah,
I don't know how in deep we want to go into this. Really,
this is your show. Where do you want to take us? Take us on a journey.
Because I should, as I mentioned at the start, Ray's actually built this repository.
Yeah, I was just looking at the contributors. So in the contributors, you can see Chris Ewald,
Chris, Frida, Jacob, myself, Katie, who's a developer with me at Dio.
Yeah,
John,
our founder.
Chelsea, who now works at Dio.
Yeah.
Lily.
Luke there.
That's Lily. John, who's another Dio developer, and then Luke.
Hey. Luke, where'd you get that? Oh, you live in Colchester. I never knew that, Luke. I'm from Southend. Colchester has the best zoo. I've spent many happy times of my life at Colchester Zoo.
So like we're
Chris's contributions.
We're still within like a year and a bit, so we can see last year's contributions.
Yeah.
You can see the craziness that was the development of this last year.
Yeah. Oh, Frida was on the show last Friday.
Yeah.
We have.
I can walk through this app, but I don't know it as in depth as Frida and Chris and Jacob probably do.
Right. Well, so let's do this. Let's focus it on. So obviously, you've done a lot of, I would say, very important pull requests since this Hacktoberfest kicked off.
Yeah.
Where are the areas that those happen?
We can probably walk through the pull request model.
That'd be awesome. Yeah,
that is cool. What I wrote.
Yeah, that'd be super interesting. Yeah.
So it is in the.
So I guess this start at this level for the folks who aren't familiar with Rails or aren't familiar with MVC. So when you say the pull request model, what is a model in this context?
This is where my lack of actual computer science training comes in, because I don't know if I can give a really good definition.
That's fine. Your understanding is just
I would call a model an equivalent to an entry in a database,
cool.
Which in the context of Rails and Active Record is quite accurate.
Nice.
This is Active Record is an ORM essentially. So the pull request model is just an extension of the database row with a load of fancy logic inside it.
Right. Sorry, I just need to quickly share a link for Shreyas again.
Go for it.
Cool. So
I'm doing a really bad job.
That explanation makes total sense to me. That like it's how your code. It's an explanation of what's in your database to your code base. I think. Like I can relate to that very well.
But then with a load of extra logic to make it actually function.
Right. Luke says active record models are more like an entity, a model being the representation of data, an entity being a coded version of a schema.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I know some of those words. Cool. So what's in the pull request model then? There's a state machine in here, which is very cool.
There's a state machine. So the first thing we've got at the top here is delegates. So there's a second model in place, the GitHub pull request model, which doesn't have an active record representation. It's a pure class that takes in a GraphQL hash from the GitHub API. So it just allows us to access that data more cleanly.
Right.
We can actually GitHub features. No,
that's cool.
It's gone to the wrong place.
That's almost cool. It's cool in theory. Less in practice.
It's gone to a spec helper. Fabulous. Cool. Okay.
They tried. Bless them.
GitHub pull request. Here we go.
The poor semantic code team.
Yeah. So this is a really basic model. It literally just takes that GraphQL hash and just presents things a bit more cleanly.
Right.
So yeah, that is. It's called the GitHub pull request, and yeah, I would regard that as just a representation of the pull request from GitHub, and then all the Hacktoberfest business logic happens in the pull request model. So we delegate a load of stuff that we need from that, and then we have a state machine. So this is how a pull request essentially works in Hacktoberfest. Right. Everything interesting happens here.
Yeah.
So if you on the Hacktoberfest profile, there's a set of at the bottom of it there's a legend with a set of states that a pull request can be in, and those tie 1-to-1 with what's here in the state machine essentially. So obviously, one feature we had last year, which has played less of a role this year because of the changes.
Right.
We have the ability to block a repository from participating in Hacktoberfest.
Right.
Which is still a feature this year, and has been used a bit this year.
Right.
So the community can report repositories that don't follow our values on the website.
Right. Such as the just make a pull request here to get the t-shirt.
So my favorite example of this is Alice Wonderland Hacktoberfest.
What?
This is a really, really big repository. I think the most popular Hacktoberfest Cheaty repository. It's been around for a long time, has a huge number of reports every year from people. And it's just, add yourself here. You can see there's like 5,000 pull requests.
That's wild.
So yeah, we block repositories like this because they don't really follow the values of Hacktoberfest. Right. We can get
which we haven't really gotten into, but I guess we could make time for at the end. But like,
we can go and get into it now.
The values being, it's not just the t-shirt, right? It's like trying to actually make a difference for open source.
It's really difficult to put it in words, and every time I try to put it in words, I write something completely different.
Right.
But yeah, I say it's not about the t-shirt. It's about contributing to open source projects and learning and helping. Yeah. Quite right there.
Yeah, part of my desk just fell off. Like, I'm not even joking. The control panel for my I have a motorized desk, as you can see, and it likes to fall apart every now and then.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So yeah, the values are kind of just it's about actually contributing to open source, and not about winning a t-shirt. If you come to Hacktoberfest with the aim of winning a t-shirt as your primary goal, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
To put it bluntly. And so we don't really allow repositories like this. Obviously, they're still on GitHub.
Right.
And they absolutely do have a value. They're a great learning resource.
Right.
So, we're not deleting them from GitHub. People can still go here and make a pull request to learn how to make a pull request.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with doing that.
Sure.
We just don't count it towards winning Hacktoberfest because we're all about legitimate contributions.
And also, like, I don't want to throw shade at this project in particular, but like, there are projects whose intention is to help people do the first pull request and get into open source that like are valuable and have other things besides just doing that. And like this one, even just looking at it, right, there's a DS store contributed like in this repo, like right there. Like there's so little care paid to the quality of this project. So like it's not even.
Well, it's also just not maintained. Clearly, it's 5,000 open pull requests.
Yeah, it's wild.
Luke, no.
Luke, you were so disappointed. Though I do have to say, I had a which year was it? Hacktoberfest 2017, maybe. I was doing a Hacktoberfest workshop where like I was teaching people how to do their first pull request, and so we had a repo where we were just doing demo pull requests. And I had signed up for Hacktoberfest at that point, which I haven't done this year for this very reason. I'd signed up for Hacktoberfest and had completely forgotten basically like where I was and things. And so I was like in front of the crowd doing a demo pull request, and I opened this fake pull request to this project to demonstrate how to do a pull request, and suddenly had the realization like, oh no, that was my fourth pull request. I just got the t-shirt because of this fake pull request that I'm giving. And it felt so bad. And had to immediately go find a real project to contribute to. So there are like, but there are lots. I mean, we've shown in lots of other past videos during this series, like projects that are like this in terms of value and learning value to people who are new, but are very different in spirit. And I think that's the big difference.
Yeah, I say, Hacktoberfest is all about the spirit of the event, which is why it's so hard to convey in words, really.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, meaningful contributions is the one way to put it. You know, actually find a project that needs help. That's not just to win Hacktoberfest.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So that was how we got into spammy, right? Spammy?
That was a tangent.
Yeah.
So we've got as far as the first state of a pull request.
Right.
So there's this pr.spammy method, which basically just goes and talks to Airtable.
Yep.
We can tangent on that if you want.
I'm always happy to talk about Airtable, and I'm always excited to see more stuff built on Airtable. What is Airtable, Matt?
Airtable is like Google Sheets, but not Google Sheets. With a useful API that's not the Google API.
That doesn't require setting up some bizarro Google Enterprise account to get API credentials.
So I have actually one of our open source projects, Do, does use a Google Sheets as the data source.
Right.
That's an adventure. Yeah, but we go for it.
So the one thing I was going to add to that is like, it acts like a spreadsheet, but also a database. It has an API. But the really cool thing about it from the Airtable side is like as an app, you can talk to it over the API and use it as a data store. But then it also saves you having to build a whole bunch of stuff, because on the Airtable side, in the Airtable app, you can make views really easily and build apps within Airtable. So like you can use its API for like the app that the users use, and then you can build your own whatever staff dashboard you need all in Airtable. So it basically saves you having to build like half of the stuff you'd normally build. It's super cool.
Yeah, so like for the spammy repo stuff, we'd use it in that context, really. The app uses it both read and write actually through the API. So here we're reading to check if a repository is in the list.
Right.
But the report endpoint, where people can actually report pull requests, writes to Airtable. But then when I go to actually go through that list and review the repositories, I do that in Airtable because it's far easier. That being said, though, last year during Hacktoberfest, we had far more of a reliance on Airtable than we do this year.
Right.
And we twice during the month knocked over their API globally.
Yeah, this does have to be said, and this is something. So I when I built the Campus Experts program, the applications for that I built on Airtable as well. Airtable has an API, and it's great as a data store for apps. It was not designed for, I guess, like big production consumer apps, right? It's like meant for like that's very much meant for internal tooling. Yeah.
This actually came up in one of our Hacktoberfest dev security channel. Hacktoberfest dev channel yesterday from security. We actually leaked. If you may have seen my tweet yesterday about leaking API keys.
Oh no.
We leaked an API key for Airtable,
which is terrible. So I was actually literally just
terrible.
In security wise, so Airtable basically the way Airtable works from like a user and authorization perspective is you can have an organization which has tables or bases as they call them, and then users have access to those API keys. You can have one API key per user, and it has no permissions. There's no permission scoping at all. It just your user has access to everything. So the way you should do like stuff with Airtable is to create like basically a bot account, like a user that has the minimal permissions, and use that API key. But depending on which billing plan you're on, that basically like multiplies the cost of your Airtable. And yeah, it's an absolute nightmare. It's just not made for this kind of stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
leaking the Airtable API key is
In
a
our
complete
case,
disaster.
I can actually give you the story of how it was leaked.
Right,
The Hacktoberfest static site, which is
right,
the site that was up until September 24th, I think.
yeah,
So before the Rails app went up, obviously that had the FAQs on it.
right,
It's a static site written in Gatsby.
right,
So the Airtable API call was happening client side.
right.
And the API key that was leaked was on a dedicated bot account within the Airtable, but
Yeah.
that account had full write access because the Rails app needs that.
Right.
And obviously, and as you said,
Nightmare.
API keys are unscoped in Airtable, completely unscoped. So not only did it have write access, but it had read and write access to the entire Airtable.
Right.
Which is also being used by the program management team for Hacktoberfest for all sorts of internal organization stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And again, there's no scoping. It also has delete access, right?
Yeah. Like the fact that the person that found this key was kind enough to just send us an email and say, you've got a key that's got write access.
Yeah.
And not just nuke our entire Airtable or leak the entire Airtable.
Yeah.
Was quite lucky, really.
That's wild.
But yeah, so those are my two gripes with Airtable. Yeah, it's they're not API first, both in terms of infrastructure and access.
Yeah, and also in terms of features, I would like to think infamous for my regular whinging on Twitter about the fact that Airtable doesn't have an eventing system yet. So they don't have webhooks. There's no way to know, for example. So say, for example, Luke shared that the Vonage SOC form was a form on Airtable. So like Airtable, you can have a database and you can create a view of that table, which is a form, which you can share with your users. And then if someone completes the form, so they add a new row in your Airtable, there's no way to get Airtable to send an event that says, hey, there's a new entry in the form so that you can react to it.
Yeah, you have to poll it.
Yeah, or their officially documented solution before was to go get a Zapier subscription, which is ridiculous. Helpful. Yeah,
so then
and all Zapier are doing is polling.
Poll it for you.
Exactly, yeah. They have now just so that kind of shows the extent to which they're not. They have an API and it's a big competitive advantage to them, but it's so far focused because they don't have basic things like eventing. They have now just added eventing, kind of accidentally, because they added JavaScript blocks, which allows you to send, which have triggers, and so from a JavaScript block you could send your own webhook. So they're kind of there. Yeah, it's pretty cool, but yeah, it has some limitations. So yeah, that was tangent number 2.
Yeah, actually, when this happened last year during Hacktoberfest, I actually tweeted about it. If anyone follows me on Twitter, you'll know how notorious I am for subtweeting about everything. And so I subtweeted, but not subtweeted because I tagged them. I complained about Airtable and the fact that they went down globally. Their CEO reached out and actually helped us quite significantly.
By restarting the app.
By restarting Airtable, basically. But yeah, so I don't know, kudos to them in the fact that their CEO was quite active on Twitter and happy to jump in there. But yeah, this year we put a load of internal caching in place. So the logic for what's hitting Airtable is the same, but we're caching it, so we're hitting it far less.
Which is another thing about them not being developer first. They've got these SDKs, bare bones, no caching, no. They have really strict API limits. The SDKs don't know about that. No rate limiting.
Their SDKs just wrap some queries.
Yeah. This is such a love-hate relationship for me. So yeah, cool. Okay, they helped you out. That's great. So that was. I can't remember how we got into this.
Cool. That's where we were at. We were going through states very slowly. So a pull request. We can mention this here. A pull request in Hacktoberfest can jump from any state to any other state, except once it's become eligible.
Right. Okay.
Once the pull request has passed that 14-day review period, it's done. It is valid. Nothing will ever happen to it.
Great. Okay.
It's locked in that state, and actually, once you win and have 4 eligible pull requests, we store the GraphQL hash of those in the database. So they will always show up. So yeah. So you'll see here, we've got transition all minus eligible. So states can jump around except eligible. So yeah, Spam repository state. Really simple check. If it's a spammy repo, put it in the spam repo state. So the way this is done down here actually is we have a check state method that gets called every time we instantiate a pull request, and it just goes through the states and returns. So if it transitions in the spam repo, it will return at that point and won't transition any further. So that's how that works. So the next state that it will check for is the invalid label state, which is a new state this year.
Yeah.
Actually, no, it's not. Do we have invalid?
Yeah, I think that was.
We had invalid labels last year, right?
Right. Yeah, I think you did. I'm pretty sure you did.
I've lost all track. So
as I said, the internal FAQ is out of date.
Yeah. So the invalid label state, again, it's a single check here. The labeled invalid method here, which is down here. So it uses actually some regex. So last year, it was a really strict string comparison. So your label literally had to be the word invalid with nothing else, which worked great for those that can create labels when they want on projects. But if you start talking to a lot of larger projects, they have a lot of stuff in place that means they can't just create random labels for the sake of Hacktoberfest.
Right.
So we updated this year, so it now uses some regex. So any label that contains the word invalid or spam will disqualify a pull request.
Interesting. Okay.
With the caveat that if a pull request gets merged, it can't be labeled invalid.
Right.
And this was again a change we made this year based on last year.
Right.
We had quite a few users report to us that maintainers were merging pull requests and then labeling them as invalid purely to stop people getting swag.
That's so mean.
Yeah. And so we added this checklist this year. So if it's merged, it doesn't matter. So that's the invalid labeled state, which is just a spam prevention method on the maintainer's end. So if they get spammy pull requests, they can label it as invalid or spam, and it won't count towards Hacktoberfest. We then go into the two new states for this year, based on our rules change. So the first one is the topic missing state. So if you haven't seen the new Hacktoberfest rules by now, a pull request now must be submitted in a repository that's opted in, or the pull request itself needs to be opted in individually. So a repository opts in by having the Hacktoberfest topic on their repository, or a pull request individually can be opted in with the Hacktoberfest accepted label. So these two states here kind of cover that. So first we have the topic missing. So this goes down to the in topic repo method, which is here. This is more complicated than you might expect it to be. First of all, we have a check here for when a pull request entered the database. So when we rolled these new rules out, we decided that because we rolled these rules out on the 3rd of October. And so we had 4 days of pull requests from Hacktoberfest already in the app at this point. And so the decision was made that we'd just honor those. So there's a check here. If the pull request was in the database before we rolled the new rules out, then these two new rules don't apply to them. And then there's a check here for a PR being opted in. So if it's labeled as Hacktoberfest accepted, we don't actually care if it's in an opted in repository. That doesn't matter.
Can I ask kind of like a little bit off tangent question, but so obviously this code base is quite unique in that it's very tied to a fixed annual event. Just as like, I guess like a code I don't know, from a maintainer perspective, these kind of like, hey, this is a rule, this is a piece of code that's very specific to a situation this year, and after this year ceases to be irrelevant. Would you come back and remove that rule, or would you leave it in there as like
this rules date here? Actually, in the repository documentation, we have already written in there, just set that date to the same date as the start date.
Interesting. Cool.
Okay. So we could come back in here and remove it if we wanted to. But equally, if you just set it to the start date, then
it's never going to be an issue. Cool.
So I don't really have an answer to whether we're going to remove that, mostly because we're probably going to burn this repository after this year.
Oh, really? Interesting.
The team aren't overly keen on having a monolith app responsible for Hacktoberfest for next year.
That makes sense.
Obviously, myself and Casey, who works with me, we know Rails because we work on the community app.
But
the rest of the development team within marketing at DO don't really work on Rails. They're Gatsby people and Node people.
Right. Yeah.
So we're looking at probably rewriting Hacktoberfest next year as a load of microservices.
Cool.
Which will just make
Makes
it far
sense.
more scalable as well.
Yeah.
So Hacktoberfest currently, I think, is allocated 48 gigs of RAM.
I mean, this is DigitalOcean. You can give it all the servers you want.
Yeah, but it's just it's quite insane how much it needs because it's just one massive monolith.
That's why.
Obviously, scaling it is also a bit of a pain. So we're looking at rewriting it next year, but who knows?
Cool.
So that's the in-repository check. So actually, at this point, we can talk a bit about GraphQL.
Yeah.
So the way this is doing it is it's just we have so repository topics here is delegated to our GitHub pull request model, which I've closed, which is unhelpful. Which in here is just a little method that just returns the names of all the topics from that GraphQL hash. Where is it going to be? This is going to be trying to find. Did he Graph API client?
That sounds about right.
No, it's not there. Pull request service. There we go. Here's the GraphQL query. So with the magic of GraphQL, it's a single API call to get all the users' pull requests, and not only that, the repository topics that that pull request has, which is just magic in GraphQL. So if you're doing this in the REST API,
right?
I daren't think about how many API calls it would be. To be frank, I think possibly just 2. Well,
for this request, it wouldn't be all that.
It'd be one to get a user's pull request, I think.
Yeah.
If there's a REST endpoint for that, and then it'd be 1 per pull request to get repository topics.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
So the fact that we could do this in a single GraphQL query is pretty cool.
That's really neat.
So we just in here we go into that repository and just request all the topic names.
Very cool.
So then there's
we've spoken about GraphQL a lot and like how it can reduce requests, but I think that's like the first time we've actually seen like a practical example of that. That's super neat.
And I've never worked with GraphQL before. This was my first time working with it.
Nice.
And I don't know, kudos to the GitHub API docs teams. The new API docs make it really simple to understand what's happening.
Yeah. Which, as we've covered on the show other times this week, they're now open source.
Yeah, which was really cool to see as well. And has caused some internal discussion about us open sourcing our docs.
Very nice. We had Erica on Technical Writer yesterday morning, spoke about DigitalOcean docs a little bit.
Yeah.
All of the shows knitting together. Look at this. Anyway, cool.
So we have this repository topics method here, which just within the GitHub pull request just presents those more cleanly to us.
Right.
And then in our pull request itself, we'll just use some Ruby magic here to filter down and select those topics that are exactly the word Hacktoberfest. And then we just use .any, which, again, I love Ruby and how simple its syntax is. You know, you want to know if there's something in an array? .any. And it would be a Boolean. So that's how we check if a repository is opted in.
Right.
So that's that state. Assuming it passes that state and doesn't go into that, we then have the not accepted state, which again is new this year, and is around kind of making sure a maintainer has approved a pull request. So in previous Hacktoberfests, for anyone that doesn't know, any pull request that was opened on GitHub counted, which you can understand why there was spam issues this year. And obviously we saw them last year, but it was far worse this year. We don't have to get into why. But one of the changes we made this year is now that a pull request must be accepted in some way or another by a maintainer of that project.
Right.
And so we jump down here. Again, we've got that check for the rules. So the pull request again was submitted before the rules change. It doesn't care about this check. Assuming it does, though, there are 3 conditions that allow a maintainer to accept a pull request. If it gets merged, we should say if it gets merged on GitHub and gets, the purple merge situation, it counts.
Cool.
I have to be very careful about that because there are a lot of projects out there that don't merge through GitHub.
Yes, like Git, for example.
Like Git, like Node, like a lot of the Jenkins projects. They merge manually, or rebase even. So those don't count, unfortunately. It's actually a feature request for next year, though I'm not sure if we'll do it because it involves basically tracking every commit in every repository and then trying to decide if it's a merge commit.
That doesn't seem especially tenable.
No, but I'm gonna leave it out there as a feature request that might happen. Equally, through GitHub, if a pull request has got overall an approving review. So this is powered by the review decision property of a pull request in the API. So it's important to note it's not just that a maintainer has approved the pull request changes. If one maintainer approved it and then another requested changes, the API sees that as requested changes. So it has to have overall an approving review, and that will allow the pull request to qualify. So for example, if a maintainer doesn't have time to merge it, but has approved it, it will count. And then the third is kind of our fallback, again, which is the Hacktoberfest accepted label. So if a maintainer doesn't want to merge something, doesn't have time to actually review it, but they go, this looks like a valid Hacktoberfest contribution, they can add that label. And equally, actually, if they close a pull request, but go, actually, this is still, I think you should still get credit for this, the label will still work even on a closed pull request.
Nice.
So that's how we check that it's been accepted by a maintainer.
Cool. Very cool. This is also, another thing that's really great about this is I feel like I've heard state machines mentioned a lot, and I frequently ask people for examples of like a code base that uses a state machine. I hope you don't burn this app completely to the ground and archive it.
We'll archive
it's a really nice state machine.
Yeah. Again, I'm not a Rails expert, so I'm sure this is probably not quite the correct way.
I mean state machines like in general, as in like real use, because state machines are something. State machines are something you encounter in like university in like languages class, right? Like in terms of like regular state machines and that kind of thing, and like then you talk about them in like real world apps, and people are like, when would I use that? And this is a really great example. Yeah,
it seems to be quite a Railsy thing actually. I've not really seen state machines used in any other project, but I know both Hacktoberfest and community use state machines.
Right.
So once we got past all those checks, we've got 2 final states, which is where it gets complicated. And that's when a pull request enters the waiting period, and when a pull request becomes eligible.
Right.
And again, there is a bit of a caveat here in that I've got an open pull request that slightly updates this logic because this is actually slightly broken.
Cool. I'm bad so Nicholas did ask earlier, was this this state machine before or after yesterday's late night bug fixing?
This is before last night's bug fixing, because last night's bug fixing isn't yet merged.
Right.
So these are actually slightly in the wrong order. I would probably put waiting above, but anyway. So assuming it's passed all the, actually no, we do the eligible check first. So assuming it's passed all the things that would make it invalid, we then do a check for if it's eligible, which basically has repeated checks from before. So it just checks, it's not spammy. In theory, they're not needed because it would be caught by the earlier state. But for the sake of making sure that the app never puts a pull request into a valid state when it's invalid, the checks are repeated. And then the other check that's here is past review period. So every pull request in Hacktoberfest must go through a 14-day review period before it counts.
Which is the maturation period. Whatever
once it has been accepted. Which does confuse some people. And in some ways is a legacy of last year. Obviously, last year it made far more sense to have this. because any open pull request counted. So we gave maintainers 7 days last year to mark invalid PRs.
Right.
But this year we actually, as part of our rules change, extended it to 14 days and left it in the app.
Right.
And so essentially this year it gives us time to respond to spam. Luckily, we haven't really had to, but it was put in as a way for us to, if suddenly we saw another load of spam turn up, we've got basically 14 days to act on that.
Right.
So that's a check here. Anyway, actually, let me pull up my pull request because we can look at what I've changed or what I will be changing once this gets merged. Because it's slightly incorrect what's happening.
15 hours ago. That's far too late at night.
This was a midnight pull request. Actually, let's just open up the conversation because you can see in here, like all true developers, I made the 2 logic changes and then spent 2 hours fighting the test suite. Which is...
Sorry, Ben just got himself banned. Okay, Ben, when you're ready to post that link again, let me know and I'll permit you. One sec.
Oh, excellent.
Okay, there. Go. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, so like all true developers, I spent 2 hours fighting a test suite for 2 really minor logic changes.
Yeah.
A lot of this comes down to the way that our test suite works.
Yeah.
Because of how Hacktoberfest is very seasonal, our test suite heavily relies on stubbing time.
Interesting.
And because the state machine in a pull request has so much time logic in it,
right,
trying to stub pull requests and stuff is really hard. And so it's like 2 hours of just trying to get the test suite to behave. I actually end up just disabling some specs, but
Naughty.
Well, if you actually go and look through this, there's quite a lot of specs that have just been commented out because we went, you know what? We're confident the logic works. We're
in the flow of things now.
We don't have time to deal with making specs work. I'm just going to merge this and hope it works.
Yeah, no, that's reasonable.
Which is a really, really bad development strategy, and I don't recommend anyone do it.
Right. But again, like the nature of this thing as a seasonal activity, and like not an app
very
that last
activity.
year round. Yeah, for sure. There's like some code practices that just have to work.
So if we look at the changes in here, let's just expand some things up here. The actual eligible logic, the only thing that's changed is that we're making sure a pull request now goes through that waiting state. And then this past review period method has changed slightly. Before, it was, I don't know. I wrote this, so some part of my brain probably understands why I did this.
Right.
But it was allowing the pull request created timestamp to be used for this review period. Which makes some sense in that the idea was if a pull request is eligible and has been eligible for 14 days when a user signs up,
right,
it will immediately become eligible.
Okay.
But it was just a really weird, really jank way of implementing it.
Right.
Which evidently broke some stuff. For anyone that missed the bug discussion in Hacktoberfest last night, if a pull request was created more than 14 days ago and was then made valid, the Hacktoberfest app currently doesn't count it, which is like a bug. I really have very little insight into how much it's gonna affect what's in production.
Right.
But luckily, Hacktoberfest is one of those things where actually making a logic change like this doesn't really matter.
Right.
It just means people are waiting slightly longer.
Right. Which is fine. And again, it's like something that could be addressed by support and in facts rather than having to change logic.
So yeah, the fix here is just now every pull request must go through the waiting period. And so this past review period is literally now just checking that waiting since timestamp.
Right.
Which is one of like the very few things we store in the database.
Okay.
So as I mentioned right at the start, the 2 things we store in the database for a pull request are the state it's in, which is obviously powered by that state machine, and then the timestamp for when it started waiting.
Okay.
Because obviously those are the only 2 things you can't really derive from GitHub directly. So we have to track those.
Cool.
So if a pull request has passed that review period and it isn't invalid, which is just repeated logic, which I guess is also bad programming practice. Really, you shouldn't duplicate logic. But I don't trust this code enough, so I did. Assuming it has passed a review period, it goes into eligible. At that point, it is ineligible forever. All the other state transitions don't allow an eligible transition. So, and that obviously stored in the database. So, no matter what happens to that pull request on GitHub, the app sees it as eligible.
Yeah.
If it doesn't go into that state, though, we then have the waiting state, which has a load of if logic in it, but really, any pull request that hasn't gone into another state should make its way into here.
Right.
Which is where the bug came in last night, because essentially that wasn't happening. Those old pull requests didn't fall into any of the it didn't fall into any of the invalid states, but then also weren't transitioning into waiting. Which came from the logic that was in past review period. So if that pull request was invalid from when it entered the database, it never had a waiting since timestamp set. And so when this call was made here to check that it hadn't passed the review period, the pull request, it was using that created at timestamp, which was more than 14 days ago. So the check in the waiting said it has passed, but it couldn't go into eligible because it hadn't yet gone through waiting.
Right, I see.
So
cool.
This was purely just when I wrote this logic at 10 p.m. No, probably like 2 a.m. in the morning on that first weekend of Hacktoberfest. I just hadn't thought through its edge case.
Which is again like one of the useful things about state machines is like worst case scenario, you can sketch all these states out and find missing transitions. Super cool. We are running close on time, so is there anything you want to wrap up with?
So I don't know. The last bit here is just that it goes into that waiting state, and the new logic is now if it's brand new into the app, we set the waiting since timestamp directly as the created app.
Right.
So the same logic still applies, just a different way. So that's the fix. That's how a pull request works in Hacktoberfest.
That was super interesting. I think that was a good little window into this app to focus in on that showed us something a little bit different that we haven't looked at in previous shows. Thank you for walking us through that. Rad, cool. So that show absolutely flew by. I feel like we could get a whole other Matt episode if we had any days.
If you have slots there, depending on what you've got.
We've got time next week, so I might hit you up on that. We've got all of these shows which are difficult for this time show, which is difficult for the Americans to do. Yes, Nicholas, we are done already. I was usually at this point I would ask if folks have further questions where can they find you, but we covered that at the beginning. You're Matt IPv4 everywhere.
Twitter and GitHub are the two places that I'm active. And
of course the Hacktoberfest Discord. Which is discord.gg Hacktoberfest.
Yes.
Cool. Let me put that up for folks. If you're not in there, it's a good time. We have a good time in there.
We do.
And by we, I mainly mean Nicholas, Matt, and Luke.
You're active, Joe. You know,
half an hour before every stream.
Yeah, active in the sense that you're just in there posting about the streams.
I would be in there more often if I wasn't panicking between streams. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us in this busy month for you. And as I said, you can find Matt IPv4. And other than that, I'll do the backstage shuffle now and wrap up the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Oh, well. All right. Thank you again, Matt. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching. I was super excited we managed to get Matt on the show and hear about how, he manages to run half the internet as a uni student, and also to see a little window into what it's like managing a program like Hacktoberfest or community managing a program like Hacktoberfest and dealing with, last minute or late night bug fixes, as we just saw, and giving us a new look at some Rails stuff we haven't seen before with all of our Rails guests. That was super cool. So this is our first of 3 shows today. We've got 2 more shows coming up. The next show is going to be in about 2 hours. That is going to be with Daniel Fury of Strappy.js. And with Daniel, we're going to be doing our old code review game where we get guests to review old code and talk about what they do differently today. Daniel is bringing a Vue app for us. So we're going to be looking at some Vue. I'm also going to be talking a little bit about community contributions and the community impact of open source projects. So that's going to be a super cool show. Daniel was a really awesome guy. So that's in 2 hours. And then the show late tonight. So the show at 8 p.m. UTC, 10 p.m. for us Brits, 10 p.m. for people in Europe, 9 p.m. for the Brits. And and 4 p.m. East Coast US time is with Hugh Rawlinson. Hugh is an amazing JavaScript developer. That show we have plans for, but could go in many directions. We have lots of things we want to talk about. We're going to be talking about semantic release and automating releases of your code. And then we're also probably going to be looking at some web audio stuff. So making bleeps and bloops in the browser. We're going to be looking at a synthesizer that Hugh recently wrote. So that's going to be super cool. That's the other shows tonight. For the rest of the week, and you can find our schedule, just a reminder, you can find our schedule for the week at twitch.tv raisedevs schedule. I can, Paranoid Android, I will explain RaiseDev to you very shortly. So for the rest of the week, and our schedule, tomorrow morning we have Beth Pan. Beth is an engineer at Microsoft, and we're going to be looking at Microsoft Graph tomorrow with Beth, an open source toolkit for Microsoft Graph, I do believe. Then the middle show, we've got Adrian from Korea. And then in the evening, we've got Jennifer Davis from the Porter project. So Porter is a project in the DevOpsy world that just got adopted by the CNCF Foundation. So the Cloud Native Cloud Foundation, the CNCF. So we're talking about that. And then on Friday, in the chat, we've mentioned Orbit a couple of times. One of the co-founders of Orbit is actually coming on the show Friday morning. So that's going to be Josh Jazilak. Then we've got Stefan Young from Customer.io and Corey Alexander. And we're going to be doing a double bill. With Corey, we're going to be looking at one of his old open source projects from the perspective of old code. How would you write it differently? And then we're going to be looking at one of his current open source projects and talking about that project and how it works and how you can contribute to it. So super packed week. You can find all that information at twitch.tv RaiseDevs schedule. So Paranoid Android wrote, what is Raise.devs and is it paid? Let me tell you about Raise.devs. We are here to help you level up your developer career. So you are a developer or someone who's written code or knows how to write code, and you're now thinking, hey, I want my next job, or I want my first job, or I want to get a promotion, or I want to get more money, or I want to change into a different industry. We are here to help you do that by helping you get the experience you need to make that role. And the reason we're focusing on this is there are lots of jobs out there that require you to have experience that is impossible to get if you don't already have the job, right? Like, you know what I mean? When you see like those like, oh, junior front-end engineer that requires like 6 years of React experience, it's nonsense like that. So our approach to that is to match you up with expert coaches who have that experience, who have been in industry, who are experts in their domain, who will help you get the experience you need to get to where you want to be in your career. We are completely free right now whilst we're in early access. So you can sign up for Raise.dev today and get matched with a coach, no cost at all, because early access, we're still testing it out, making sure we know how this is all going to work, making sure that we provide a valuable service to you. So in exchange for you being an early adopter and helping us kick the tires on this thing, it is completely free. So you can sign up today at Raise.dev. Just a little note for Paranoid Android. We do currently have a very full queue because these are real coaching calls. You will have a real one-to-one conversation with an experienced developer, and that takes time. And we've got a lot of people who have signed up. So you might get a message about being on the wait list. That does not mean that you're not going to get into the program. It just means that it will take a little while to match you with a coach. But do not worry, you will get that kickoff call. It's just a little bit of a wait. So that's the thing about Race.dev. I hope that answered your question, Paranoid Android. If you want to know more, if you go to our Twitch page, in the videos, you will find a highlight for a conversation called Bridging the Developer Experience Gap. We also have it on our blog. And that's an interview with our founder, John Britton, where he talks about like why Raise.dev exists and how it works. Here's that blog post if you're interested. So yeah, there you go. I hope that helps. Thank you, Ben. Really appreciate that. And if anyone has any questions about Raise.dev and like you can't find answers on the website, you can get us at contact@raise.dev, or you can chat to us or me at raise.dev on Twitter or jna.sh on Twitter. So our Twitter is raisedevs. My Twitter is jna.sh, jna_sh, and I'm happy to help you with anything. So the last note from me before we head off, as I've said from the schedule, we do have 3 shows a day for the rest of October. Really busy schedule, a lot to keep track of. If you want notifications when we go live, you can follow us here on Twitch, hit the love heart, and then hit the bell. It's a 2-stage process. You have to subscribe first with the love heart and then hit the bell to get those notifications. You can also follow me. Follow us on Twitter at RaiseDevs, where we tweet about the show an hour before every show happens. Paranoid Android, yes, coaching is live, so they're real coaching calls. Do not worry about not being a native speaker. That's true of a lot of the folks who come for our program, and is also actually true of a lot of our coaches. We have a lot of coaches who are not native English speakers, and like those calls can be at your pace. If you are completely uncomfortable doing calls, let us know. That's, as I said, we're in early access, so we're still working out how to best make the program help everyone. So actually hearing your voice on that, on the fact that like a call isn't the best format for you and you'd like a different way to engage with your coach, would actually be really useful feedback. So if that's something that if that's an issue that you want to chat to us about, I'd love to talk to you about that. If you can drop us an email at contact@raise.dev, we will try and make sure that we can find an alternate way for you to engage with those coaching calls in a way that you're comfortable with. But if the worry is mainly that like you are concerned about not being a native speaker and less that you don't want to do the calls that way, do not worry about not being a native speaker at all. That's not a problem. So yeah, cool. All right. So that's everything from me for this show. We'll be back, as I said, in just under 2 hours. Thank you again to Matt. Thank you again for all of you who have been listening and tuning in. If I don't see you at the next one, I hope to see you very soon. Why do I have... Oh, no. There's 3 of me in here, and I don't know which one's the music. Let's see what happens. See you at the next one. Thanks, everyone. Bye.